Hello dear students, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Here in this video you will learn about a poem, A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Carey, grade 9th. At first, let's check the introduction to the poem. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. And what is ballad? A ballad is a poem narrating a story in short stanzas. A ballad is such kind of poem which tells a story in short stanzas, and in the poem all the stanzas comprise 4 lines. We can say every stanza comprises 4 lines. In total there are 16 stanzas in this poem, and these stanzas will tell us a story. So ballads are part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. This story is of Northland area, the area which is near the North Pole. The title of the poem is A Legend of the Northland. So a legend means a historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. In the title, Northland means the area in the northernmost part of the earth, that is near the North Pole. So we can say this is a story of the area in the Northland. Let's start stanza-wise explanation. Stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. Here, poetess Phoebe Carey is telling us how the people in the area Northland they are living. In this region around the North Pole, the duration of day is very less because its position is such that the rays of sun reach for very less time. When this area is experiencing winter season, the duration of night is very long and the daytime hours are very less. And here in this first stanza you can check in 4th line word they has been used, and this word they refers to the people who live in this region. Second stanza, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. Here, Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It is a snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region, and people tie the reindeers to sledges and then reindeers pull those sledges. He adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they have worn funny looking clothes made of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. Here in 4th line you can check literary device. Here you will see funny furry. In these two words fur sound is repeated, so we can say literary device alliteration is used here. Stanza 3rd. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. In line 1st, they refers to the parents or elders, and them refers to the children or the younger generation. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that the story is true, but he tells the story to the reader. Maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message. Stanza 4th. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, you know. Here in this stanza, Saint Peter is one of the first pupils of Jesus Christ. And here one word preaching meaning giving religious lectures. So let's check. The story is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people, just like all saints do, then an incident happened. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling around the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. When Saint Peter was moving around the world giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage, where a small woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. Hearth means fireplace. Stanza 6. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Saint Peter reached at a door of cottage of a woman, and Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day. He was very hungry and was feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes, and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. What was the response? We'll check now. Next stanza. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. So the woman was very selfish. She didn't give cake from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. She didn't want to share her things, but when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given to someone, and she didn't give that cake to Saint Peter. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Here the little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at the cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as wafer, but she couldn't part with that. The third time she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poet says that she rolled and rolled to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough and made it like wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread to the saint. Stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. The woman reasoned that here the woman gave the reason that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small, but if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen, and she didn't give any cake to Saint Peter. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Saint Peter became angry. He was very hungry and he was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. Stanza 12. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Saint Peter was in anger, and Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She didn't deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food and shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish for all the resources she has. She didn't want to share them with. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Here St. Peter cursed the woman that she would become a bird, but she did not deserve the human form. She shall become a bird, and just like birds, build their houses by boring into the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day. Similarly, she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as St. Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. St. Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. Stanza 15th. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head, and this cap was there on the bird's head also. But the woman's remaining clothes had burned and turned black in color, just like coal. Here in stanza 14, in last line, black as a coal, here literary device simile has been used. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. People who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, seen this kind of bird in the woods. They see that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him this story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was greedy, and so she was cursed by St. Peter and turned into a bird. They get a teaching that they should not be greedy, that human beings should not be greedy. Summary of the poem. The poem is a legend about an old lady who angered St. Peter because of her greed. The story goes on like this. One day St. Peter was preaching around the world and reached the door of a cottage where the woman lived. She was making cakes and baking them on a hearth. St. Peter was fainting with hunger. He asked the lady to give him a piece of cake. The cake that she was baking then appeared to be too big, so she did not give him that, and instead she baked another smaller one. That also appeared to be so big, so she did not give him that also. The second time she baked yet another smaller cake, but found it too big to give away. In the third attempt, she took an extremely little scrap of dough and rolled it flat. She had it as thin as wafer, but was unable to part with that also. She angered St. Peter a lot. He said that she was not fit to live in human form and enjoy food and warmth. St. Peter cursed her and transformed her into a woodpecker bird who had to bore in hard, dry wood to get its scanty food. She can be seen in the trees all day, boring and boring for food. Yes, students, I hope you have understood this poem, and I would suggest that you should read this poem from your textbook, and you should be able to identify different literary devices and the rhyme scheme. Thanks.